After thousands of mail-in ballots were rejected in Texas statewide primaries in March, election officials and voting rights groups are stepping up efforts to make sure voters don't run into the same problems with ballot rejections going forward. Nearly 25,000 mail ballots were rejected for the March 1 primaries, a far higher rate than prior elections. Some ballots were rejected because identifying data didn't match what was on file. But election officials and voting groups say a design issue with the envelope that Texas voters used to return their mail ballots was most responsible for the rejections. Grace Sheeman, president of the League of Women Voters of Texas, says voters missed important instructions located right under the flap of the mail ballot return envelope. That is where voters have to provide either a partial social security number or their driver's license number. Voters wouldn't see the section if the flap is down, she says. It's only visible if the flap is up. And the reason behind that was to keep it secret so people couldn't get that information when it was going through the mail. Sam Taylor, Assistant Secretary of State for Communications with the Texas Secretary of State's office, says election officials are also convinced that the new voter ID field. A lot of these changes were prompted by a voting law Republican state leaders enacted last year. Taylor says that among the changes, more information was required to be on the return envelope. That affected the envelope's design. There's more language that's required, and as a result there is more language and text competing for the same amount of real estate, he says. Whitney Quessenberry, the director of the Center for Civic Design, a nonprofit that focuses on using design to improve the function of democracy, says the issues over Texas mail ballots offer a great example of why design is important. There are costs to this, she says. So, we can see that, when a vote by mail envelope is better designed, that fewer are rejected. Quessenberry says bad design is an issue in a number of states and with different facets of voting. Sometimes what I would think of as not great design happens not because someone is trying to trip a vote. They are not doing some of the things that we would see in, say, a commercial project, where you try it out. You would test it. Sheeman says the League of Women Voters of Texas has been working with the Center for Civic Design to create a pamphlet for Texas voters that breaks down everything they need to do to make sure their ballot is counted.